In this part, I plan on showcasing the end to Claire's Scenario A. But before we get there, it would only make sense to get our look at Leon's Scenario B finished up as well, to tie things together in a nice neat bow. The only problem I've been having with performing this somewhat simple task is the overall complexity to the event as a whole. You see, the timeline of events in Resident Evil 2 somewhat falls on its arse when you try to link in the events of Scenario A and B together. Repeat tasks need to be performed in each scenario, undoing the hard work of the good people at Capcom and causing some serious confusion in this Resident Evil player. Let's start at the beginning of Leon's Scenario B and try to figure out where things all went so wrong.
Okay. Still in one piece.
Claire!
Leon!
I'm okay. Head to the station. I'll meet you there.
Now, as stated in previous videos, which you really should have watched first, this is a third part after all. This title has two scenarios, Scenario A and B, and both play out fairly similar with a few key changes here and there, and are meant to be meshed together to create one full 2-hour-ish timeline of events. If you play as Claire, the car does a complete turn before crashing into the wall, sending Claire into Scenario B and Leon into Scenario A. All well and good, this is actually a pretty cool change to the canon to try and attempt to link all of the potential storylines together, just in case you happen to decide to play Leon Scenario A first. Now, in the story that I'm going to be playing out with Claire taking the lead in Scenario A, done and out of the way, we begin Leon's Scenario B with a very short run to the police station. In fact, it's less than a few seconds away. As soon as we get control of Leon, we're thrown into another of these amazing looking action scenes that we're going to expect as the intro to this amazing title. After running a straight line to a nearby gate, we find that we are actually situated on the outside of the police station already. A cool twist though, this turns out to be a rather nonsensical one. If we try to play our entire run side by side, things get even more confusing. So let's go ahead and play along. Leon arrives at the police station first and heads through the back. Upon arriving, he witnesses a cop shoot down a helicopter that is flying overhead.
Hey! Get over here! Hurry! I can't set her down. I'll drop you a rope ladder. Grab onto it. Come on. Just a little more. Get off me! Stay back! Don't come any closer! Stay back!
Now, said helicopter crashes and blows up into an amazing looking blaze of fire. Our first task is to put out said fire in order to access the rooms it has now blocked off. At this point in the game, Claire is probably at Kendo's gun shop still, or the very next area just behind it. As Leon, we make our way into the downstairs area and get a hold of the valve handle and proceed to put out the fire. But wait, we already did this as Claire in Scenario A. So already things become incredibly confusing. Upon heading back into the police station, we are actually greeted with a cutscene that creates the first major problem that we are tasked with in Scenario B, and perhaps the biggest inconsistency. Now, I completely understand why Capcom hid this from the player. It's something that you never even hear about or see in Scenario A, and as such becomes an even bigger surprise in this title when it takes place. You see, unbeknownst to anybody who has ever actually finished Scenario A, and ever started Scenario B, but has basic knowledge of Nemesis, will find this quite the shock, as Resident Evil 2 has some surprises still left up its sleeves. The first of these surprises comes in the form of Mr. X, a tyrant in a trench coat, primed with the sole mission of destroying Leon and any other surviving police officers found around the police station. Something else that wouldn't make any sense if you were to play through Scenario B as Claire. Although I suppose you could twist that logic and state that because you're related to Chris Redfield, the tyrant perceives you as Chris. Now, Mr. X is a pretty interesting character, and is actually one of the 6 monsters that were dropped around Raccoon City. There were 5 other Mr. X prototypes, which were sent to the Raccoon City incineration plant in order to protect any leftover Umbrella secrets from the US Army's Delta Force, who were given the coordinates by accident and can actually be found defeated in Resident Evil 3. Although a fairly obscure character, Mr. X has recently popped up in other media in the Resident Evil universe. Most interestingly, the film release of Resident Evil Damnation. This version sees him take on several lickers, as well as attempting to kill Leon again in a couple different attempts. These include Leon using a rocket launcher and another guy that's in the film driving a tank into Mr. X. Now, after we deal with Mr. X for the first time, we are tasked with collecting the jewels from the pictures above the fireplace and from moving the two statues. Hold on a minute, we already did this with Claire. Are you telling me that the picture that we set fire to somehow regrew? We burnt that picture as Claire, but so now we have to redo that as Leon. It really would have made a lot more sense for us to just completely skip this one and instead have the item left waiting for us and just saying that Claire already performed this puzzle. We are then tasked with grabbing a keycard and unlocking the doors, but Claire already... Okay, you can clearly see some inconsistencies here, but things do begin to line up a little nicer as we move forward. For example, upon entering one of the next areas, we see Sherry and follow her down a corridor. After this takes place, Claire appears and we can finally begin a more solid timeline. Claire is safe and sound in the police station and the hunt for Sherry's safety begins. At this point, the two stories do take a complete opposite turn though, with Claire's story focusing around William Birkin and his daughter, and Leon's story now focusing on Ada, her boyfriend John, and Ben, a prisoner who claimed to have had information on the going-ons in Raccoon City. Now this all starts to make sense, as when you try to come down to this area in our run through as Claire, we find that we aren't strong enough to move the police truck that is blocking the doorway. Something which Leon and Ada managed to accomplish almost immediately upon arriving. And what better time than ever to take a look at another very important female in the Resident Evil series, Ada Wong. An American woman of Chinese descent, Ada is first mentioned in the first Resident Evil game in a letter from a dying Umbrella Corporation researcher simply named John.
June 8th, 1998. My dearest Ada. By the time you read this letter, I will no longer be the person you once knew.
He was infected by the T-virus during the outbreak in the Arclay labs and asks that Ada destroys the Spencer mansion and outs the incident to the public in order to get revenge on Umbrella. This is her first on-screen role, but definitely not her last, as she goes on to appear in several more titles in the Resident Evil series, from Resident Evil 2 to Resident Evil 4.
Bit of advice, try using knives next time. Works better for close encounters.
Long time no see.
Ada.
Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles. Operation Raccoon City, and Resident Evil 6, as well as the animated film Resident Evil Damnation. Ada plays such an important role in the Resident Evil timeline of events that she's even in the live-action movie, Resident Evil Retribution.
My name is...
Ada Wong, operative for the Umbrella Corporation, one of Albert Wesker's top agents.
Though posing as an innocent for the first time, her true role is kept under wraps throughout most of Resident Evil 2, only showing her hand when she needs to. There are several scenes where she appears damaged or gravely injured, only to disappear from her last resting place and act some kind of mischievous behaviour in the background, unseen from the player. For example, returning from death to throw Leon a rocket launcher. After me and Ada were introduced to a second character. His name is Ben, an American investigative journalist who worked for Raccoon City before the incident took place. He was critical of the police department's slow response to the mansion incident and the STARS team's dismissal after such events took place. Through a number of interviews, Ben found out too much and began pointing his finger at Umbrella, something which angered Chief of Police Brian Irons. Although he thought himself safe in his jail cell, he quickly becomes one of William Birkin's victims and is given a very gory end. Now, whereas in the first scenario with Claire, we only managed to fight Birkin upon entering the cable car in his second form, here on Leon's campaign we are actually greeted by the very first form of Birkin at a very important part of the game, acting as somewhat of a guardian to the underground passage to the sewer system. Luckily by this point Leon's overpowered arsenal is already in full swing as we unload our clip of magnum rounds into him and send him on his way. He won't be seen again until we ourselves make our way onto the cable car with Ada. Speaking of Ada, after she gave us the slip before, she makes an appearance and decides to stick around for once, but not after Leon tells her off for her reckless actions.
What was that all about? Running off like that was reckless and stupid. Those zombies are everywhere, not to mention that thing that got Ben.
I was there, Leon. I know.
Proceeding through the sewers in a route not so different from Claire's, Ada is attacked by Annette Birkin. Leon, being the hero that he is, dives in front of her and takes a bullet himself, giving us another section of the game to play as Ada. This is when more is revealed about Ada's background, and it's stated that her poor boyfriend John is in fact an undead, just like the rest of the lab's workers.
Mistaken. Identify yourself. Ada? Ada Wong. Ada Wong. I've heard that name before. Now I remember. One of the men from Chicago who came to assist the T-virus research used his girlfriend's name as his password. Ada and John, I believe.
How did you know? Who are you?
Annette Birkin. My husband is the man responsible for the creation of the T-virus. William Birkin.
What?
John's dead. He became one of those zombies. My condolences. And although I regret this, you will be joining him shortly. I won't let anyone take the G-virus away from me.
G-virus?
It's capable of creating the ultimate bioweapon. Its potential is even greater than that of the T-virus.
Then that must mean the creature in the police department is...
Precisely. My husband, William. And it's all Umbrella's fault. None of this would have happened if they hadn't tried to steal his research away from him.
Where did you get that pendant? It looks exactly like the one I gave Sherry. She dropped it. I've been holding on to it for her.
Liar! Give it back to me!
Too bad.
After taking back over as Leon, we enter the room where we fought the crocodile in our first playthrough as Claire and experienced something pretty interesting. Nothing happens. Literally, nothing happens. We already defeated the crocodile in scenario A, and as such don't need to fight him again. I was actually taken somewhat off guard by this development, as I had half expected to have to redo the boss fight with the giant crocodile, but such a thing wasn't necessary. At this point, Ada bandages up Leon, and we spend the rest of the game playing as bandaged Leon. If we hadn't made the decision to use the alternative clothing options, my bad, never mind. I much prefer Leon's awesome sideways shooting in this alternative outfit. One hand in a pistol like a boss. At this point we move to the Sky Tram and are attacked by William Birkin's incredibly sharp claw. Hilarious, at this point in my run through of scenario B, I actually had no ammo, and had to let Ada deal all of the damage to this foe. After we finally touch base outside of the Umbrella Labs, we run into Mr. X again and are forced into another battle with him. The entire part of the game from this point forward is very interesting when compared to scenario A, as we have to go about things a completely different way to how Claire experienced them. The tram that takes us down the elevator breaks down, and we're tasked with getting the power up and running, something which Claire never had to deal with. Maybe it's because Claire went down on the tram first, and Leon simply followed. We know that that's the order of events because of how Claire had to face the second form of William, whereas we are now forced to fight him in the third form. Unfortunately, in our second fight with William Birkin, Ada is knocked down by Birkin's claw, and we're tasked with fighting the beast on the outside alone. Luckily, my modified Magnum makes quick work of him, as his talons are fast enough to rip through Leon's defences almost immediately. Back inside the Umbrella Labs, we're tasked with turning the power on. Another inconsistency, as Claire should have been here already and gotten that sorted out. Nonetheless, the monsters at this point of the game are much stronger than in Scenario A, with some tougher lickers in each of the corridors, more mutated than the standard that we faced earlier in the game. Outside of a mini-boss of that is the Moth, which Claire is also faced with, there isn't much difference between Claire and Leon's final run of the game. Claire is faced with more lab coat zombies than Leon, who is for some reason tasked with fighting naked zombies. At this point we also run into Annette Birkin again, who has a hold of the G-Virus. She accuses us of killing her husband, before this conversation is interrupted by the awesome Mr. X, who has come to finish off Leon once and for all. Annette then runs around the Umbrella Labs and confronts Claire, claiming the exact same thing, that she killed her husband. Apparently Birkin has some kind of power, because as soon as Annette mentions his name, he appears nearby and slays his poor wife, digesting the G-Virus as it lays dormant next to her body. Now back as Leon, we make our way through the labs and are confronted by Mr. X again. We are then saved by Ada, even after finding out the truth about her being a secret agent. Ada fights the tyrant, but he's much too powerful for her and is thrown into a nearby electrical conduit.
Leon, please, escape.
No. We're a team. I can't just leave you behind.
I'm just a woman.
At this point our timelines sync up again, as Claire gets in contact with Leon and instructs him to go after Sherry. Carrying her in his arms, we make our way to the train station, where our escape is only minutes away. As Claire is topside waiting for an elevator, which is misspelt, she is attacked by William Birkin and forced into a final fight with the monster. At the same time, down below outside the train, Leon himself is attacked by a now unhinged Mr. X, no longer restrained by his jacket. The tyrant's true form is apparent and he is pissed. Lunging at Leon with his claws, we take a few shots with our custom magnum before a mysterious person appears and offers a little help. Now if anybody watching this has ever finished Resident Evil 1, you'll recognise this scene as a huge throwback to that title. We use the rocket launcher and fire a missile directly into the monster, and completely ruin our score at the end of the game because we used a secret weapon. Damn. Nonetheless, this isn't the end for Leon, as Claire didn't do a good enough job finishing off William Birkin like she thought. The monster is back, as it stretches its limbs and body into the back of the train, forcing the train into a self-destruct sequence that cannot be undone by our heroes. As Leon, we quickly fire a missile into the beast's open mouth, only this isn't the end for the creature like we thought. A few more shots reduce the once great William Birkin into a huge mess, simply outstretched onto the back of the train. The endgame FMV kicks in and our heroes have to quickly make their way out of the train before it explodes. Luckily, the train takes Birkin with him. What follows is probably one of the worst end of game songs ever put together. Maybe not as worse as Silent Hills, but pretty fucking close.
Hey, it's up to us to take out Umbrella.
And there you have it, the end of Resident Evil 2, having played through as Claire and Leon. What's left in this game? Well, because we're playing on the GameCube version, we have actually unlocked the ability to play a special game type. Nicknamed Extreme Battle, this minigame was introduced in the DualShock edition of Resident Evil 2 and was later added in the Dreamcast, PC and GameCube ports of the game, despite coming out at the same time as the N64 version, which doesn't include this game mode. Probably because of memory limitations. Extreme Battle tasks the player with surviving a long gauntlet of enemies while using a limited supply of ammunition and health supplies. You get to pick from 4 characters and are then tasked with finding 4 antivirus bombs found in the RPD precinct. The bombs are then planted on the Umbrella train, which would end the level. In a pretty cool twist, Leon and Claire aren't the only 2 characters available. Added in is Chris Redfield and Ada for us as well. Chris is a complete rip from the first Resident Evil game and includes his damaged grunts and idle animations. Pretty cool. And we're still not done. After the extreme battle, we also have the 4th Survivor minigame, which tasks us as playing as Hunk, aka Mr. Death, or the Grim Reaper. He is the leader of the Alpha team in the Umbrella military. The earliest piece of information regarding him was that he was trained in Rockfield Island in 1996. His nickname of the Grim Reaper was earned by being the only man who had returned from several missions, which were tasked to him by Umbrella. Hunk and his team made their way into the Umbrella Labs in Resident Evil 2 in order to retrieve the G-Virus from William Birkin. But when Birkin refused, it was his teammate who killed Birkin. Hunk is a playable character in several minigames, but has been yet to be given his own standalone title. Now, the minigame itself is called the 4th Survivor due to Hunk's escape alongside Claire, Leon and Sherry being canonical in the series, despite Ada also escaping, though presumed deaf at the time. And we're still not finished. After finishing Hunk's run through the game, a new minigame becomes available, the Tofu Survivor, in which you play as a giant piece of tofu and are basically tasked with completing the same run as Hunk, only with no weapons, apart from your knife and some healing items. Remember when I spoke about rooms that were designed to kill you in the first video? Well, that's what this entire game is based around. Room after room of things made to kill you. Unfortunately, even if you do finish this game mode as Tofu, it doesn't last very long, as Tofu is immediately eaten by Hunk on the results screen. Now that's it for the gameplay and story side of Resident Evil 2, and to finish up I'd like to talk about the speedrunning community for this title, as there are several out there worth talking about. Even in the last 10 months, the first, second and third place medals for this title have all changed hands by mere seconds. A Swedish man by the name of Dara Zanjol has the fastest time on the Japanese PC version of this title, clocking in at an amazing 48 minutes and 53 seconds.
What is it? Oh my god! I can't fucking move my god! Oh my goodness!
The tricks deployed in this video are incredible, and I definitely recommend taking some time to look into the speedrunning community for this game, if you're brand new to it. See, there's more to this game than just its standard release, as production on this title started a month after development of the first game. It was initially known as Resident Evil 1.5 and still haunts several fans to this day as they try their hardest to recreate what was once existed. Before there was Claire, there was Elsa Walker. Their narrative paths would remain closed off from each other in this build, though Leon and Elsa would have had a much bigger role to play. Leon would have had to work alongside Marvin Branagh and the scientist known simply as Linda, whereas Elsa Walker would be tied in with John, who obviously in Resident Evil 2 Actual is long deceased, as well as Sherry Birkin. Now, the police department seen in Resident Evil 1.5 was originally much smaller and more modern in design, before being completely overhauled to look more like a classic location that people could actually explore. There were more zombies on screen than the standard found in the actual release, and the sacrifice for this was that they looked much worse. Players could equip armour, and these even resulted in cosmetic changes that could have been damaged, something that was briefly explored in Resident Evil 3, with Jill picking up the pouch. Despite the production continuing steadily on throughout 1996 and into 1997, creative disagreements between director Hideki Kamiya, producer Shinji Mikami, and the higher-ups at Capcom resulted in Resident Evil 1.5, which was 60 to 80% finished according to several reports, being completely scrapped. The reasons given? Mikami wasn't happy with the quality of the assembled game thus far. Gameplay was criticised for being dull and boring, and Capcom supervisor Yoshiko Okamoto was unhappy with the story being a conclusive end to the zombie saga. Okamoto wanted a sequel that would serve as a springboard for future sequels and spin-offs, creating a universe of possibilities in the same vein as James Bond and the Gundam series. Now, with a $5 million advertising budget behind it, Capcom was banking on Resident Evil 2 selling 2 million copies during its lifetime. The sequel, of course, ended up selling over 4.96 million units on the PlayStation alone, and another 810,000 copies when the DualShock version was released. Resident Evil 2 is my favourite Resident Evil game. And although most people tend to say that their personal favourite or the best Resident Evil game was Resident Evil 4 or 3, my allegiance will always lay with Resident Evil 2, and I really look forward to the Resident Evil 2 remaster, although I am pretty worried about it. I want to say thank you to everybody for watching this video. Hopefully by the time this video goes live, I've hit 100 subscribers, which is an incredibly small milestone to hit. Though I appreciate every new subscriber, I want to say thank you to the people at Reddit, on the Resident Evil Reddit, as well as the Spoonie Experiment Reddit, as well as the people in the Twin Perfect community, who have always had time to look into my work for me and give me some well-needed feedback. Just want to say a big thank you to all of my new subscribers again. I can't wait for you to be with me and see what I have coming in the future. I don't even want to tease anything because I really don't know where I'm going to be standing when this finally gets released, but I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.